In the Black Out Loud.
The quest for ethical AI. Generative artificial intelligence has the potential to transform business. But with so many ethical questions at play, accountants must balance professional skepticism with reaping the benefits of these game-changing tools. By Susan Muldowney. This article has been edited for audio purposes. Article begins. On the list of the hottest buzzwords of 2023, ChatGPT surely scores a position near the top. Created by San Francisco tech company OpenAI, this generative artificial intelligence tool promises to create almost any form of content without direct human intervention. Generative AI tools are in the spotlight, not just for what they can do, but for how they go about doing it. And, in some cases, whether they should be used at all in professional settings. As the use of generative AI becomes more widespread and normalized, accountants must find the balance between applying professional skepticism and staying open-minded about the benefits of this emerging technology. GPT stands for Generative Pre-Training Transformer, a type of AI adept at understanding and creating human language. Some accountants are already using generative AI tools to help analyze historical financial data to make predictions about future trends. AI algorithms can detect irregularities and anomalies in financial transactions, and they can automate the generation of financial reports such as balance sheets and cash flow statements. AI-powered tools are also being used to assist in audits by analyzing vast amounts of financial data to identify potential audit risks. They can also enhance client service and support by answering common accounting-related queries. Anju de Orbis, FCPA, Managing Director of Ultimate Access Education Institute and a member of CPA Australia's Ethics and Professional Standards Centre of Excellence, says, AI has delivered many advantages, but there is a need for skepticism because it does present challenges and ethical concerns. These concerns include data privacy and security, bias and discrimination, trust, and the role of human judgment. If generative AI tools are black boxes, how can the validity of their answers be evaluated properly? Dr. Simon Longstaff, FCPA, Executive Director of the Ethics Centre, notes, "We have AI that we know works, but we can't explain precisely why. That's because the way the large language models and other systems operate means they can be trained to produce a result. However, it's not like an older form of computer logic, where you could see that A leads to B leads to C. We don't have explainable AI at the moment," adds Longstaff. People are trying to work out how to interrogate what's happening or create systems that can be explained. But it means we're currently using things that we don't fully understand in terms of their internal operations. Appropriate levels of governance around technology have always been a requirement. When personally identifiable information is involved, for example, there are regulations that dictate what companies must and must not do. Professor Matt Cooperholtz, data scientist with Deakin University's Centre for AI and the Future of Business, notes that forward-thinking companies have already created ethical guardrails to ensure their use of these technologies is appropriate and in line with their customers' expectations. "We don't put brakes into a race car so that we can go slowly," Cooperholtz says. "We put brakes into a race car so that we can go really quickly, but safely." Most organizations have been using AI for a long time, even if it's simply through something like a recommendation engine or a third-party piece of marketing software. I think now it's just very obvious that AI is hitting the mainstream, and we'll see things like generative pre-trained transformers being integrated into things like Microsoft Office Suite and the Google Suite, so that they'll be landing on every desktop soon, says Cooperholtz. Technology should never be unrestrained, but who is ultimately accountable for generative AI tools? Simon Longstaff says it's a question yet to be resolved. We have to work out, for example, whether or not the person who initiates the system and designs it has adequately discharged their responsibilities in terms of building the ethics into the design itself and putting in certain protections and restraints that we want. He says technologies like generative AI should always be bound, by degree, by ethical consideration. You've got to start at the very beginning and say, what is enabled by this technology? How am I going to restrain it so that there are only things which are intended and, hopefully, for the good? How do you minimize the use of it for other purposes? Longstaff adds, there can also be another level of accountability in terms of the person who deploys it. To what extent have they put in place measures to ensure that it is only used for the proper purposes for which it was designed? APES 110, Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants, sets out the fundamental principles of ethics for the profession. The code requires accountants to be independent of mind in order to act with integrity and to exercise objectivity and professional skepticism. Andrew DeAlwis says, if someone who's performing an audit has ethical concerns around the information that AI is giving them, whether that's around bias or accuracy or whatever it might be, have a responsibility to raise their concerns. Longstaff adds that the results produced by generative AI tools should also be able to be tested against analog judgment in the real world. He says, this is not different to what accountants have always done, particularly in the auditing profession. Companies are constantly producing accounts which they claim to be a true and fair representation of the state of the company's financial affairs, only for it to be discovered through the independent review of auditors that perhaps it's not true. If you've got an expert system like AI producing findings that are supposed to describe the world, well, any good accountant will go into the world and say, does it look right? Is there any evidence beyond what the system has produced to validate that? These are bread and butter things to do for a profession that is oriented towards things being true, Longstaff says. That's a core skill to bring to bear. Cooper-Holz says that companies should ensure that AI systems have an appropriate level of explainability, transparency, and replicability. Will these models break when they're presented with new data that they haven't seen before? Are they secure? Is there the ability for a nefarious actor to capture sensitive intellectual, or even worse, customer information? Cooper-Holz asks. He adds that there's another set of performance monitoring around safety and control. These are challenging things to monitor, but not at all impossible. DeAlwis notes that accountants should consider the broader technology ecosystem while using AI tools. Who is feeding the data into these systems, and can we trust the data? She asks. Management accounting is all about insights for the future, and that's where AI will get really interesting. But we need to constantly think of the veracity of the data. That's where professional skepticism comes in. We need to question the insights that we are getting from technology. As generative AI tools evolve, Matt Cooper-Holz says we can expect a greater focus on responsible AI in general, and international standards are already being written. He says, I think we'll move towards an adoption of certain standards for explainability, for ethics, for bias, security, and replicability. All of these areas will hopefully move towards realistic and attainable standards and tools that organizations can use. In the meantime, DeAlwis says that accountants must apply their professional skepticism to the use of AI in the workplace. She says, accountants are required to serve the public, and that underpins so much of our ethical considerations. When it comes to making decisions about the use of technologies, accounting professionals have a seat at the table to ask the right questions. But in order to ask the right questions, we need to know what to ask. She says, we need to gain knowledge about technologies. We can't assume that it's not part of our job to understand how technologies like AI work.
In the Black Out Loud.